In the eyes of many, Count Dooku was always a villain, the evil Sith Lord who plunged the galaxy into a civil war and eventually caused the rise of the Empire and the fall of the Jedi. But not too many know Dooku was once an honorable man, an idealist who only wanted what was best for the galaxy. Where people saw order and freedom, Dooku saw a kind of corruption he wanted to destroy. His idealism, however, came at the cost of his morals, allowing the dark side to consume and lead him to his eventual downfall. Chapter 1. From Riches to Temple Life. Dooku's story begins in 102 BBY, in the High Republic's fading light. He opened his eyes on Serenno, a world of old forest and named after its former ruling family, the House Serenno. His father was Count Gora, and his mother was Countess Anya. In the present days, their house had ruled for generations, but their son was born with something unforeseen in his blood. The Force had touched the infant. What should have been a blessing became a curse in his father's mind. Gora feared the strange. He feared the whispers that followed Force sensitives. He called them freaks, and he decided his heir would not be one of them. Gora sent word to the Jedi Order, "Come take the child," before carrying the infant to the edge of his own lands and leaving him at the forest line with no name and no clothes. Night pressed close on as spine wolves stalked the shadows. Cold crept into the baby's bones before a Jedi Seeker found him, just as death was on the child's doorstep. That rescuer brought him to Coruscant, where the Grand Temple took him in. The Order gave him a name that already belonged to him. Dooku was to be his new identity. Not too long after Dooku was given a new identity and path, he joined the Jedi Temple's Hawkbat clan, where younglings laughed and sparred together. Dooku, however, was known to not laugh that much. Instead, he preferred to focus on his studies and training. Unlike most unruly kids, he followed the rules set like stepping stones, seeking to be perfect. He compared himself against every other child in the clan, working very hard, having a discipline that was unmatched, as he would get up early in the morning and go to sleep late in the evenings. Master Tarasanube guided his clan and noticed the boy who wanted to be perfect, but he also saw the cost. Dooku had distanced himself from his peers through his actions. His distance bred tension. One youngling called Darth Tyranus disliked him especially. Tyranus was quick with word and mocked Dooku as his excellency, a reference to Dooku's heritage. The others sometimes laughed along because it was easier to laugh than to be pulled into a feud. Dooku tried to ignore the insults. Instead, he put the heat in his chest into his practice drills and training. As he struggled mingling with the other kids, there was one friendship that did come from his time at the clan. Sifo-Dyas was restless and bright and saw the world in ways other kids didn't. Dooku admired that boldness while Sifo-Dyas admired Dooku's discipline. Together, they balanced each other, even often getting into trouble because of their minor misadventures. But in those first years, their bond mostly meant shared training halls and whispered plans to sneak extra study time in the archives. But the past followed Dooku even as he tried to outrun it. Chapter 2. The Bitter Homecoming. In 90 BBY, the Order sent a group to Serenno for a grand festival, with Grandmaster Yoda leading the party. Master Sinube and Eula Braylon came as well. Younglings, including Dooku and Sifo, traveled with them to learn by watching their elders in public. Serenno welcomed the Jedi with a big welcoming ceremony. Meanwhile, Dooku walked the streets of his former home planet. During a demonstration of saber forms, a loud sound cracked through the sky. Two children ran laughing through the smoke and sound as they had set off some thunderburst caps. Dooku saw the kids and thought he knew one of the faces and decided to slip away in pursuit. At the fairground, he caught up to the two young nobles and found them cornered by thugs. Dooku did not hesitate. Using the Force and an electro blade, he drove the thugs back. The children introduced themselves as Jensa and Ramil, and when Dooku told them he was born on Serenno, they offered him a tour through his home planet, which he had never seen before. They moved through the festival together where, for a few hours, Dooku got a taste of the life he could have had if he'd never left this world. Jensa led him to the Great Assembly, where she told him stories about Serenno and how its noble families defeated the Sith Empire. But as Dooku listened to the stories, an ancient carving called to him. It was of Tirataka, an ancient dragon from lore. Jensa warned him to leave it, but he touched it anyway. Suddenly, the ground shook as the building trembled and buried them underneath them. They survived, and Dooku tried to lift the wreckage with the Force, but before he could do anything, Master Yoda arrived and moved the debris for them. The Masters cleared the ruin as Count Gora stormed forward when he heard the involvement of a kid named Dooku. He faced Yoda furiously, proclaiming that he never wanted to see his son again. In that moment, a young Jedi learned the history of his own origin. Jinza was his sister, and Ramil was his brother, whereas Gora was his father. Right then and there, he learned he was the cast-off. Back on Coruscant, Dooku asked Yoda for the full truth. The Grand Master told the story of how Gora had called the order and then abandoned the baby on the forest edge. Dooku pictured the wolves and the cold as anger, and fear rose. But instead of letting his emotions get the best of him, he poured them into training. But as he kept himself busy, Dooku obtained a device tuned to a secure channel. It was the only way he and his sister could speak in private without anyone knowing they had been in contact since their fateful encounter on Sereno. But as much as Dooku wanted to experience the same things his sister was allowed to have, he kept his hunger for belonging from his voice, knowing that his fate was tied to the Jedi, and his studies were what kept him from that feeling of want. Chapter 3. First Exposure to the Sith. 2 years had passed since that bitter homecoming, and the archives became Dooku's second home. One day, after yet another lesson, Sifo-Dyas pulled Dooku into a quiet corner and revealed the journal of Claes Teradine, an expelled Jedi. The pages hinted at a locked trove below the library called the Bogan Collection. Sifo wanted to see it, and although Dooku always adhered to the Jedi rules, the potential to gain more knowledge overrode his will to stick to rules. He let curiosity get the better of him, and the duo made their way to a room where the Order hid artifacts younglings should never see. Inside the archives, they found different dark side artifacts, scrolls, and weapons. A fragment of metal called Dooku towards. Dooku reached for the fragment, and as soon as he did, the Tirataka from Sereno roared in his mind, leading him to panic. Dooku lashed out uncontrollably with the Force and accidentally threw Sifo-Dyas across the room, which alerted the chief librarian to their presence. They were brought to the infirmary where Sifo-Dyas' wounds were treated. Master Yoda and Master Braylon came by, being very disappointed in the boy's actions. But in the midst of the lecture, another voice joined the room. It was Lena Costana. She worried that younglings even managed to slip into a vault that should have been ironclad. She and the Masters debated what it meant to prepare children for darkness. As that was happening, Dooku listened and memorized every word. Despite Costana's presence, the boys were still punished to decipher the Lothal Papyri, a collection of agricultural treaties. But Sifo found a secret book that Costana slipped into the papyrus. This was the Bestiary of Darth Kaldoth, a Sith work. Dooku wanted him to report it, but Sifo refused. The refusal gnawed at Dooku until worry turned to suspicion. He confronted Costana on the contemplation balcony, demanding an answer. He wondered whether or not she was secretly Sith, but Costana answered that this was simply a test. Dooku, however, sensed anger and frustration within Costana, allowing him to actually believe he was confronting a Sith Lord. The two engaged in a short duel where Costana spoke about Darth Sakya and the curved hilt the Sith used, similar to Dooku's own lightsaber hilt. She also told him she was aware of Dooku's connection to the Tirataka. Despite Costana's experience, she began to realize how skilled the young Dooku was. The Jedi Initiate broke her defense with a flurry of attacks that became part of his signature fighting style. Yoda, however, arrived in time to break the fight, telling Dooku he had jumped to a conclusion. At the same time, the Grand Master also chided Costana for her methods. But something changed after that. Dooku kept seeing Costana when she returned from missions, seeing her as a mentor. He wanted to understand the darkness rather than run from it. It didn't take time for him long to engage himself with her theories about the Sith. Curiosity took over the young Dooku, who continued to incorporate his studies into his philosophies and fighting style, eventually becoming a prodigy among the many Jedi initiates he trained with. Chapter 4. The Grand Master's Apprentice. In 86 BBY, Dooku finished his initiate trials and set his hopes on Lena Costana, thinking his mentor would choose him as her Padawan. The Padawan tournament arrived, and Dooku met Sifo-Dyas in the ring. He fought with one hand behind his back and a blindfold over his eyes, but still won. The victory did not bring the prize he wanted. Costana chose Sifo-Dyas. Dooku felt the sting of it, yet the hurt faded when none other than Grandmaster Yoda stepped forward and claimed him as his apprentice. A bond grew between student and master. Yoda took Dooku out into the galaxy and let the stars do part of the teaching. They voyaged to Lasbane in the Mid-Rim and walked through forest on Kashyyyk, where the air hummed with life. There, Dooku watched Yoda stand before a giant Tarantatic. He saw how calm his master could be, and how Yoda used this discipline and serenity as a shield. But while the master and pupil bonded, Dooku's renegade personality was often a problem Yoda had to endure. Not too long after, Sifo-Dyas saw a vision of a giant solar storm coming for Protobranch. He told the council that Dooku sided with Sifo-Dyas and with Kostana to warn the planet. The council, however, decided to do nothing, believing that not all visions were meant to happen. Yoda agreed with that line, and the door closed in their faces. Despite that, Dooku's defiance opened another door. He, Kostana, and Sifo-Dyas went to Protobranch's Senator Teveti and warned him of the danger. However, the senator seemed rather disinterested, only seeing a danger for the planet's resources rather than their population, so they went to Protobranch with a reluctant Yoda. The storm came as Sifo-Dyas had seen it, killing a big part of the population. Meanwhile, the Jedi barely lived through it. But as Dooku survived, his faith in the Jedi had a first crack. His trust in the Council thinned, along with his respect for the Republic for him. Republic leaders were more concerned with counting resources and profits before counting the dead. That was unforgettable and unforgivable for the young Dooku. By 82 BBY, Dooku was 20, and back on Serenno for his mother's funeral. Anya lay at rest. His father, Gora, met grief with rage and struck him with words and fists. "Freak," Gora said. Despite the pain he felt, Dooku focused on a new mission at hand. He, Sifo-Dyas, and Kostana went on a mission to track down a relic on Asusto, believing they were following a trail of Sith artifacts. But this was a trap, set by the Presagers of Hakote, a ritualistic organization that existed on Hakote. They captured Dooku to use him for a dark side ritual. During that time, Dooku experienced a series of visions of his future, and amidst such darkness, he used Force lightning for the first time to kill his captors, allowing him to step into the world of the dark side against his wishes. Kostano and Sifo-Dyas, however, kept him from plunging deeper into darkness by teaching him a cleansing ritual involving arm wrappings designed to keep him centered in the Force. For now, he was still well in the light. Chapter 5. Master to Qui-Gon Jinn. Between 82 and 78 BBY, Dooku completed his training with Yoda and rose to Jedi Knight. Yoda saw him as one of the greatest Padawan he had ever had in his centuries-old life. Soon thereafter, he became a Jedi Master. Eventually, he set aside his first weapon and forged a curved hilt that fit the line of his wrist. With his specialized lightsaber and fighting style, he soon became one of the best duelists in the galaxy. He soon stood among the finest Jedi of his era, and campaigns across the Republic built him a great reputation. Dooku soon became an instructor for the Thranta clan, teaching them his brand of swordsmanship and discipline. He also became a mentor. Dooku took Rael Averross as his Padawan and trained him for 10 years. Rael went on to reach knighthood under him. During those years, Dooku did not remain within the temple alone. He traveled to Dathomir and rendered aid to Mother Talzin of the Night Sisters in what turned into a long-time partnership. He gave her a lock of his hair in what was an exchange that set a brief accord between different paths. In 68 BBY, Dooku accepted a second student. Qui-Gon Jinn was 12 and newly assigned. On the evening of the assignment, the boy presented himself in Dooku's quarters and tried to look calm. Then Dooku asked if the boy was afraid. Jinn confessed that he was. He said he did not fear Dooku, but feared failing to become a Jedi. He feared that he might not be worthy. Dooku went straight to the root of the fear, which was a future where the young Jinn might fear himself, and a future that might not be the one he wanted. Instead of rejecting Qui-Gon, Dooku surprised him. He called the answer wise, because most Padawans either deny fear or cannot name it. He praised the boy's insight and told him that truth sharpened courage. It didn't take long for Dooku to drill into Qui-Gon the same interest he had for knowledge, artifacts, and prophecies. The young Jinn learned from his master that the Jedi no longer believed in prophets, prophecies, and visions. Despite that, the master and apprentice duo developed a certain kind of fascination for tales of visions and prophecies. eventually helping Qui-Gon's own philosophies and beliefs. Months later, the Council sent them to Shurapak, where a battle burned across the surface. It was Jyn's first war. When they landed, they found Rael Averross among the fighters. Dooku introduced his former student to his new one, and the three spoke like soldiers at a crossroads. Soon, a strike team formed to hunt the Falleen bounty hunter Shinda Mal. During the search, Jyn was seized Shinda and held at gunpoint. Before she could kill the boy, Dooku struck, lightning flashing from his hand. Maul fell, with Jyn telling Rael what had happened. Rael was not shocked, understanding that Dooku was going to do whatever it takes to get the job done with minimal casualties. The next missions were full of pain and politics. Senator Dagonet's son had been abducted, prompting the Council to send Dooku and Jyn to the Senator's home world. There, they found a land stripped by mines and mills. They walked toward a barren village under a haze of smoke. The villagers were silent before learning that the duo were Jedi and not agents of the Senator. They were afraid of their own Senator. A woman then spoke of how their world had been drained of resources and essentially forgotten by their leader. Eventually, they found the Senator's son, bound but unharmed. Dooku asked what he knew of the lives of those who held him. The boy said he did not blame them. A runner arrived and announced that Dagonet had landed with soldiers. The kidnappers accused the Jedi of leading them into a trap. Dooku steadied them and said the Senator did not know of the investigation. Outside, the Senator handed bread to the villager who had betrayed the hiding place. Another villager muttered that many would do the same. Dagonet ordered Dooku and Jyn to take villagers and return his son. Dooku, however, relented, saying that their investigation was not complete. And when the Senator demanded obedience, Dooku said the Jedi served the people of the Republic and not its leaders. Dooku's defiance led to a firefight where soldiers raised rifles and villagers were forced to fight. Dagonet gave the Jedi one last chance to step aside. As hard as the Jedi tried, they could not halt the rising slaughter. When most of the villagers had fallen, the Senator called a halt. Dooku stood among the citizens of the Republic, killed by their own leader. Rage rose in him with the shape of justice. He reached into the dark and lifted his hand. The Senator's throat tightened, but Jyn shouted for his master to stop. Dooku hurled him backward against the barn door and kept the crushing grip in place. He walked forward through the smoke, with soldiers stumbling out of his path. He stood over the politician and squeezed harder. Jyn saw one thread left. He cut the boy free and brought him into the square. The son rushed to his father and begged Dooku to spare him, with Qui-Gon saying it was over. Dooku released the hold, and the Senator collapsed and, clinging to his breath, stared up in shock. Afterward, the Senator left with his son as the young man promised to work for his people. Dooku, though, doubted that anything would change. Jyn asked whether doubt had driven him, but his master only praised him for saving the lives. He even said his student was a wiser man than himself as they walked back to their ship. Chapter 6. Losing Faith in the Republic. By now, Dooku had become one of the leading names in the entire Order and quite possibly one of the strongest Jedi. The Council trusted him, and Jedi Master Mace Windu on a mission to recover the corpse of a fallen Jedi Council member, Jedi Master Katri, who had been killed in an ambush on Raxus Secundus. He was no longer a young man by any means, and he had already served the Jedi Order for decades, but age didn't dull his eyesight toward the injustices and corruption of the Republic. Dooku, however, remained loyal to the Jedi Order until the events of this mission. And throughout his time working with Windu, he had doubts about the circumstances surrounding Katri's death. Senator Larrick had stood with Katri during the ambush and had survived. Dooku questioned how a politician lived while a Jedi Master fell. They landed on Raxus Secundus and met Larrick. He said he had been present when the attack began. Dooku pressed him for a complete account, but the Senator hesitated and shifted details. Windu noticed the same gaps and favored alerting the Council. Still, Dooku insisted on acting at once. At the scene, they examined the circumstances and concluded that multiple attackers had been present, but Larrick's shuttle showed no blaster scars. The contradiction hardened Dooku's doubts, forcing him to demand the truth from the Senator by force. Larrick panicked and admitted that his guards had killed the Jedi Master, and before he could say more, a blaster bolt killed the Senator. The guards and their droids opened fire as Dooku and Windu fought back, beating them quite easily. The last fighter sank to his knees and gave his name as Simic. He confessed to the killing, saying they had learned that Larrick used his Senate seat to enrich himself while Raxus was carved into contracts. They only kept Larrick alive to force him to speak for their reforms at the next Senate session. Windu asked why Semij had not shown Katri the evidence. Semij answered that the Jedi served the Senate in practice and that peace meant order for the wealthy. He saw no ally and envoys who guarded the interest of the powerful. Afterward, Dooku and Windu secured Semij and brought him to a cell. Dooku returned to speak with him in private. He did not excuse murder, but affirmed that a people could defend their world. He urged Semij to keep his movement alive and to evolve rather than wither. With the case closed, Dooku and Windu brought Katri's body to Coruscant. The temple honored her and then committed her to a flame. After the funeral, Dooku asked Windu about the rumor that Windu was to receive Katri's council seat. Windu confirmed the offer. Dooku asked if Windu had known of the offer before they left for Raxus. Windu said he had not. He believed the council preferred him because Dooku had strayed from the mission, and a senator had died. He promised to speak on Dooku's behalf. While Dooku thanked him, he grew wary of Windu's rise in rank. Years later, council member Jor Aerith invited Dooku and his Padawan to represent the Order at the Coruscant Dragonfire Air Rally. The goal was diplomatic goodwill. Dooku and Eula Braylon voiced frustration with the council's pursuit of politics. Aerith said Dooku's presence would help since he had the gift of conversation that she lacked. Dooku agreed and turned the trip into a lesson on Candavent customs for his student. At the rally, he met his older brother Ramil, who flew in the race. Dooku questioned why the heir of Sereno risked his life in sport. Ramil brushed aside the concern and took the start. He flew well until his airspeeder failed and crashed. The wreckage bore the marks of sabotage. Dooku and his apprentice slipped from the stands and followed the trail through service corridors and hangars. An investigator tried to bury the facts and answer to a Genet crime boss named Cinevax. Aerith sent a recall and ordered them back to the event. Dooku ignored the order and seized the criminal. Under questioning, Cinevax revealed knowledge of council communications. Their recall had been logged in exact terms. The leak was inside the temple. Dooku summoned the temple guard and escorted Cinevax to the High Council chamber, where he stated the charge of espionage. Through the Force, he felt guilt settle on Eula Braylon. As Dooku lit his lightsaber, Eula raised hers and asked if he intended to kill her. He stepped back and said he sought justice, then placed her under arrest. Investigators uncovered the leverage that Cinevax held. Unbeknownst to the Council, Aerith Terex was Eula's son. Blackmail had turned a Jedi Master into a tool for criminals. Dooku and Qui-Gon exposed Terex, and he was taken into custody. The Council removed Eula from her seat, opening a vacancy in the Council. Yoda offered the seat to Dooku, who accepted the chance to become a Council member in the hopes of changing the Jedi Order from within. Qui-Gon himself eventually passed his trials to become a Jedi Knight. During that time, he took a Padawan named Obi-Wan Kenobi, who grew in skill and became a hero among the Jedi. Throughout that time, Dooku remained in contact with his former apprentice, who also achieved the rank of Master. At some point after Qui-Gon's rise as a true Jedi, Dooku took on another apprentice, but she fell to the dark side and died, becoming an embarrassment to her master. Still, Dooku kept her two red-bladed lightsabers. Years later, Dooku realized that transactions had shaped policies in the Republic as credits bent laws. He judged that the Jedi stood too near to the Senate to act freely against such corruption. It didn't take long for the distance between Dooku's conscience and the Jedi Order to grow, but the final nail in his fall was yet to be struck, and the man responsible for such happened to be the very Dark Lord who had the Republic at the palm of his hand. Chapter 7. Rise Count Dooku. Unbeknownst to Dooku and the Jedi Order, careful eyes had been watching him and his growing disillusionment with the system. Dooku's growing discontent with the Republic and its protectors was already within the scope of the secretive Sith's radar, with Darth Plagueis showing interest in him. Even before Dooku decided to take a seat in the High Council, he was already familiar with Higo Damask, a moon industrialist who was secretly Plagueis behind the shadows. This Sith Lord had studied Dooku's conduct with a patient eye and a clear sense of opportunity. Plagueis had watched Dooku since certain events in the Jedi's life revealed a brush with the dark. Dooku was also frustrated with what was happening regarding the politicking and profit-chasing senators and businessmen throughout the galaxy. But what he wasn't aware of was that it was Plagueis and his apprentice Sheev Palpatine who were orchestrating the corrupt and shady dealings that frustrated Dooku. But while Plagueis was still grooming his apprentice, Darth Sidious, he viewed Dooku as a possible insurance policy if ever things were to go wrong with Palpatine's schemes as a rising politician. He also considered turning Dooku indirectly to fracture the Jedi Order. The idea lingered until Plagueis introduced Dooku to Palpatine, at the time Senator of Naboo. The introduction mattered because the rapport that grew between Dooku and Sidious would prove central to the Sith grand plan. Senator Palpatine sensed Dooku's disenchantment and had followed him for years. He saw the advantage having an ally with Dooku's reputation and skills. Palpatine may have been in league with Plagueis, but he had his own secret plot. Even before the Battle of Naboo in 32 BBY, he met with Dooku to test opinions and cultivate him as an ally. Dooku still acted within Jedi orthodoxy, yet his doubts widened. He flirted with the belief that the dark side could be used without personal corruption as dissatisfaction with the Order grew. Eventually, after his brother, the Count Ramil, tried to turn Serenno's population against the Republic by hiring mercenaries to forge unrest in the streets, Dooku returned to his home planet yet again, as his sister Jensa pleaded for his help. After killing his brother, he decided that Serenno was in need of him to bring back order. Due to that, Dooku decided to part ways with the Jedi Order. Not as a dark initiate or a Sith Lord, he simply decided his ideals were no longer in line with what the Jedi believed in, and that he was needed more on Serenno. He then assumed his place as the rightful heir to Serenno, becoming its count and inheriting his family's enormous fortune. Dooku was 60 at this point, and his departure from the Jedi Order saddened Yoda tremendously. When Dooku wanted to return his lightsaber though, Yoda wanted him to keep it, as he saw being a Jedi as more than a title or the belonging to an order. Dooku thanked his old master one last time for his guidance before parting ways. Soon thereafter, by 40 BBY, he started working in secret with Sidious, who had become a close ally in his quest to reform the Republic, as Palpatine was able to convince him of the Sith's plan to reform the Republic. For Sidious, he started to go on trips to recruit potential allies for the Sith, but he was yet to burn any bridges with the Jedi or fall entirely to the Sith's ideals, for he still adored Qui-Gon Jinn as a beloved former apprentice. It was that connection that kept him from completely falling to the dark side at that point in time. But such a connection had to be severed if the Sith wanted Dooku on their side. Chapter 8: The Fall to the Dark Side. After accepting Sidious's offer, Dooku became the quiet architect of a manufactured war. He used his access to the Jedi Temple to advance the Sith grand plan and to conceal each sign that might reveal it. The most important task he directed was the creation of a clone army that the Republic would one day deploy. How the Sith learned of the project remained unclear. Dooku later said that Sifo Dyas had invited his help. Dyas, who once had a vision about planet's downfall, had another vision about the Republic's own demise. He feared the Republic's turmoil and the Council's complacency, eventually ordering the Kaminoans to grow the army as a reserve in case civil war erupted. Unbeknownst to Sifo Dyas, though, he had been deceived by the Sith and was doing their bidding. By 33 BBY, Dooku was in search of more tools for the upcoming war against the Republic. He discovered a Kaleesh warlord named Grievous, once called Kaiman Jai Shilal. Dooku and Sidious kept an eye on him during the Kaleesh War against the Yamri of Huk. The Yamri were wealthy and technologically advanced. When the Kaleesh forced them back, the insects sought aid from the Galactic Republic. The Republic and the Jedi answered, taking the Yamri's side against the Kaleesh. Embargoes and fines followed, causing starvation to spread across Kalee. Grievous's hatred of the Republic and the Jedi hardened. The Kaleesh warrior entered the service of the Intergalactic Banking Clan. As an enforcer, he was phenomenally successful, and became one of the clan's most valuable assets and catching the eye of the Sith Lords. They saw a commander who could be reshaped, and a subject for experiments that fused technology with a living will. Soon after, Dooku had Grievous's shuttle sabotaged and it fell from the sky. Dooku appeared and kept the Kaleesh alive while going to Geonosis to forge their greatest weapon. He claimed to Grievous that the Jedi were responsible for the sabotage. The charge fixed Grievous's fury. He embraced Reconstruction and demanded to fight again. Under Dooku's direction, Separatist cybernetic experts and Geonosian biotechs rebuilt Grievous almost entirely. Dooku first placed in his hands a weapon that had belonged to a long-dead friend who had once been a Jedi. Then he instructed the Kaleesh in lightsaber combat and refined each motion to craft the ultimate Jedi killer. In 32 BBY, Dooku returned to the Jedi Temple and slipped into the archives. Using Sifo-Dyas' authorization, he erased Kamino from the charts and hid the cradle of the army. As he left, he noticed agitation among the Jedi and asked Jocasta Nu why. She said Qui-Gon Jinn had reported contact with the Sith on Tatooine. Jinn and his Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi had gone to Naboo to negotiate with Viceroy Newt Gunray about lifting the blockade. Gunray followed Sidious's orders and tried to have them killed. The attempt failed, and the Jedi escaped with Queen Padme Amidala after an encounter with Darth Maul, a suspected Sith Lord. Dooku answered that Jinn had an active imagination, to which Nu reminded him that he once did as well, but he said such imagination held little value in those halls. Dooku then found Jinn walking with Master Yaddle and pressed him about the Sith. He guessed correctly that the Council did not want to believe that conclusion. The former Master also said he had warned them for years about a coming darkness and that they had ignored him. Yaddle, speaking for the Council, said she did not doubt Jinn, yet saw no reason to spread alarm before they knew more. She urged caution as Dooku told Jinn to act carefully if he met a Sith again, and added that he would no longer be there to protect him. Not long after, Jinn, Kenobi, and Amidala returned to Naboo and broke the Federation invasion. Maul killed Qui-Gon in the duel that followed. During the same span, Dooku ensured that Sifo-Dyas would never speak. Using the name Tyrannus, he contacted Lom Pike of the Pike Syndicate and ordered him to murder Dyas by shooting down his shuttle during a mission. The killing closed the last mouth that knew the origin of the army, and Dooku took control of the project. News of Qui-Gon's death drew Dooku back to the Great Tree in the Temple of Coruscant. He had taken a young Jinn there many times. Yaddle approached and told him the funeral would be held on Naboo and that the Council would attend. Dooku said he would not go because his presence would not be welcomed. She asked if he blamed the Council, to which he answered that Jinn had become one with the Force and that letting go was required. Dooku then traveled to the works to confront Sidious about the cost of his schemes. Unbeknownst to him, Yaddle had her own suspicions about Dooku. She followed him in secret and learned that the former Jedi Master had met up with the shadowy figure. During that time, Dooku accused Sidious of making him betray everything and everyone he had known. The Sith Lord answered that every act had served a greater good, and that such betrayal had been necessary. After hearing their exchange, Yaddle confronted them and urged Dooku to surrender to her and help defeat Sidious. He hesitated, but Sidious said the Jedi blindly served a corrupt Senate and ordered Dooku to prove his loyalty. Dooku ignited his blade and fought Yaddle, pressing the experienced Jedi Master back. Wanting to convince Dooku to help end the Sith once and for all, Yaddle admitted that the Council had been wrong, and told him she had stepped down. She begged him to turn back, but he did not. They crossed blades again as Yaddle retreated toward the doorway that led to her ship. Dooku mocked her for running to the Council. She answered that he had run straight into evil. His anger sharpened, forcing him to hurl her into the doorframe. Dooku threw the lever and shut the heavy door down on Yaddle, believing he had killed her. As Dooku fell into anguish, Sidious lifted him with praise and called him worthy. Then Yaddle rose, summoned the last of her strength, and raised the door. However, the effort drained her as she lay at Dooku's feet to tell him that many would suffer under his scheme for order. Dooku replied that he would give her peace and killed her. Killing a Jedi Master, a powerful Council member at that, completed Dooku's fall to the dark side. With Maul gone, Sidious was in need of a new apprentice. He anointed Dooku as his new follower, christening him with the name Darth Tyranus. Dooku considered the name formidable and wore it with pride, but there were other things to do as the new master and apprentice duo needed to tear the Republic apart. Chapter 9. The Groundwork for a Civil War. Palpatine had risen to the rank of Supreme Chancellor, the most powerful person in the Republic. Soon after, Sidious murdered his master Darth Plagueis, allowing Dooku to become a true Sith Lord by virtue of the Rule of Two. Resorting to working as equals, Sidious handled the politicking over at the Republic, using his influence to steadily stir trouble within the Senate. Meanwhile, Dooku prepared the galaxy for war. On a moon of Bogdan, Dooku recruited Jango Fett as the template for a clone army, while using the name Tyrannus. He offered a large salary and promised Fett an unaltered clone as part of the compensation. Sifo-Dyas had ordered biochips for every clone as a check against rogue Jedi, but the Sith Lords used this to their advantage, altering the chips and using them as their trump card against the Jedi when the time was right. After securing Fett, Dooku advanced the larger Sith design by uniting galactic corporations with worlds that had grown tired of the Republic. He fostered an alliance of separatists, eventually becoming their idealistic leader at the Count of Sereno. He also led the independent movement for self-determination, which allowed him to visit universities and deliver lectures. While Dooku still oversaw Grievous's training in the ways of the lightsaber, he still wanted a true acolyte, just like any other Sith Lord. His chance encounter with the Dathomirian Jedi Asajj Ventress on Ratatak proved to be vital. With Sidious's blessing, Tyranus took Ventress as his apprentice, training her in the dark side of the Force to use her as an assassin. Her first task was to sever her master's final ties to the light. Dooku ordered Ventress to find his sister Jensa, who had vital information about his plot against the Republic. Unbeknownst to Ventress, this was to be an assassination mission, as Dooku ordered her to murder Jensa in front of him, proving herself worthy as his apprentice. Sometime later, Dooku returned to public view openly. He seized a Republic holonet station in the Raxus system and delivered a broadcast attacking corruption in the Republic. Outer and mid-rim systems already chafed under ineffective bureaucracy. His speech primed them for a separatist cause. He also meddled across the galaxy relentlessly by aiding anti-Republic coups on Ryloth and interfered in the politics of Kashyyyk and Onderon. He began to rally worlds and major corporations into the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Dooku also refused every offer to negotiate with Palpatine. After the Confederacy of Independent Systems, or CIS, took shape, he traveled to Geonosis to renew Bactoid's contract with the Geonosians. Dooku set an early headquarters in the Tion hegemony. The House of Tion still held sway, yet his presence secured strong support for the CIS. In the tense years before the Clone Wars, he courted Eriadu's governor, Wilhuff Tarkin. He told Tarkin that war was inevitable, and pressed hard for Eriadu's strength. Palpatine had arranged these meetings to test Tarkin's loyalties, but Tarkin remained firm to the Republic, to the delight of the secretive Darth Sidious. More importantly, Dooku also promised Viceroy Newt Gunray that he would eliminate Senator Amidala, who was vital to foiling his plans of taking over Naboo several years prior. This promise to the Trade Federation was vital for the outbreak of a war between Dooku's faction and the Republic his master had been controlling in secret. Chapter 10. The beginning of the Clone Wars. Dooku's schemes had become all too public for the Jedi to ignore. Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi and his Padawan Anakin Skywalker were tasked to guard the Senator, eventually foiling an attempt on Amidala's life. The failed assassination attempt turned Obi-Wan's attention toward what could possibly be a bigger scheme orchestrated by a more nefarious group. Jango Fett, who had failed in killing the Senator, didn't know he had Kenobi on his tail. The Jedi traced the bounty hunter to Kamino and eventually Geonosis, where he saw Count Dooku meeting with Commerce Guild leaders as they pledged their assets and loyalty to the Separatists. Kenobi intercepted the meeting and sent a report, but droidekas trapped him mid-transmission, taking him alive. Dooku visited the cell and feigned surprise, denying any ties he had to Padmé's assassination attempt. He even spoke of Qui-Gon, whom he believed would have joined his cause had he still been alive. Dooku went on to say that the Sith controlled the Senate, but Obi-Wan rejected the claim and even said that Jin would have never joined the Count. The Sith simply left him to his fate, knowing he was going to eventually have him executed. Anakin and Padmé went on a daring rescue mission that also got them caught. Dooku arranged the execution of Amidala, Kenobi, and Anakin in the Petranaki Arena, where they fought bravely until Master Windu led a rescue team of 200 Jedi. The Jedi fought their best against overwhelming numbers, but were no match for the sheer firepower of Dooku's droids. Before the droids could finish the job, Grandmaster Yoda arrived and saved the day with the newly discovered clone army. Dooku watched the clone army arrive with glee. This was the moment his master had been waiting for before withdrawing to the Geonosian Command Center. When asked about the clones by the other Separatist leaders, Dooku feigned ignorance of his knowledge of the clone army and then gave Poggle, the leader of the Geonosians, blueprints for the ultimate weapon, which happened to be the Death Star. The Sith Lord promised that the designs would be safe with his master. He then fled on a speeder with Obi-Wan and Anakin chasing him to a secret hangar. The Jedi duo took Dooku on, only for Dooku to take Anakin out with Force lightning, something Skywalker had never faced before. Afterward, he made quick work of Obi-Wan's defense, showing the difference in their skills and experience while voicing his disappointment about Kenobi's technique. Anakin rejoined the fight and fought Dooku on his own, only for the more skilled duelist to disarm him, literally. Dooku cut Anakin's right arm off, beating the young Padawan easily. But before Dooku could finish the job, he heard a cane hitting against the floor. In the doorway stood Yoda, Dooku's former master. After a brief exchange, Dooku saw himself superior to his old master, as his powers have grown substantially ever since he started meddling in the dark side. Their ensuing duel, though, showed that Yoda easily matched Dooku's mastery of the dark side of the Force. An epic saber battle ensued, forcing Dooku to retreat instead of trying to determine whether or not he was already strong enough to defeat his former master. Successful in his retreat, Dooku surprisingly went to Coruscant unbeknownst to the Jedi that he and his master were there the entire time. Sidious then confirmed to Dooku that the war had begun and that their plans were in motion. Chapter 11: The Height of the Clone Wars. The Clone Wars had begun, and Count Dooku took an active role as the leader of the Separatists, seeking to destroy the Republic and start a new order in the galaxy. Meanwhile, the Jedi Order reformed their ranks, having lost dozens of Jedi during the Battle of Geonosis. They took over the Grand Army of the Republic, turning from keepers of the peace to generals of war, leading clones into battle against the overwhelming droid numbers of the CIS. As the Separatist leader, Dooku's role was not on the battlefield, but in the political realm. He took an active part in bolstering the Confederacy's strength, using whatever means necessary to win more allies and force systems to bow to their power. As their leader, despite having a Separatist Senate in place, Dooku was able to overrule anything in the Confederacy and was their de facto dictator. The Hutts, of course, were part of Dooku's long-term plans, believing that the Hutt clan had enough power and control over the Outer Rim to strengthen the Separatist ranks through their hyperspace lanes. He devised a plan to put Zero the Hutt in the leadership shoes of the Hutt clan. In doing so, he used Ventress as an extension of his will. The Dark Agent kidnapped Jabba the Hutt's son to use as a bargaining chip, while also putting the Jedi in a tough position. With Dooku assuring Zero he would have complete control over the Hutts, Ventress tricked Jabba into believing that his son had been killed by the Jedi during their rescue mission. However, Anakin safely recovered the Huttlet, but crashed into the deserts of Tatooine. Eager to put the Hutt clan in the palm of his hands, Dooku followed Skywalker to the Dune Sea, where they fought. This time, Anakin more than held his ground, unlike the last time they dueled, but the battle was cut short after Anakin revealed that the Huttlet was with his apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. Anakin left the fight to help his Padawan against Dooku's Magna Guards. Eventually, Jabba learned of Zero's treachery, forcing Dooku to admit that his plan had failed. Jabba then granted access to his hyperspace lanes to the Republic, which, in truth, was part of the Sith's grander design of spreading the clone forces all over the galaxy. It was a victory disguised in defeat for Dooku and his master. Not too long after, Dooku learned that King Katunko of Toydaria intended to meet Yoda on Rugosa, and was considering the Republic. He sent Ventress to win over the king. She offered a test. If Yoda with 3 clone troopers defeated her droid battalion, Toydaria could join the Republic. If her droids captured Yoda, Toydaria would join the Separatists. Dooku approved and judged Yoda reckless for leaving Coruscant. Yoda prevailed, with Katunko witnessing Ventress's act with treachery. Toydaria declared for the Republic, but was nearly killed by Ventress before Yoda's intervention. The loss added more fuel to Dooku's fire of disappointment toward his apprentice. Dooku next joined General Grievous aboard the prototype heavy cruiser Malevolence in the Abrogado system. A Republic fleet arrived, allowing Dooku to test out the power of his secret ion cannon, disabling the cruisers for destruction. The mysterious ship and its powerful weapon forced Skywalker to spring into action, mounting a daring rescue mission against the Malevolence. Grievous's next target was a medical center operated by the Republic, but upon learning that Skywalker and his strike team were also on their way, Dooku warned his general not to underestimate Skywalker. He had already seen the extent to which Anakin would take his recklessness to achieve victory. Dooku knew Grievous was not prepared for what Skywalker had in store for him. To that end, Dooku arranged to capture Senator Amidala when she traveled to a nearby system to negotiate with the banking clan. Knowing Skywalker's weakness was his soft side for his secret wife, the Sith Lord wanted to use Padme as a bargaining chip. However, the plan failed, leading to the destruction of the Malevolence, unbeknownst to Dooku, who never received a status report from General Grievous. At that point, Dooku's disappointment in his apprentices was growing ever larger. As the conflict settled into a stalemate, Viceroy Newt Gunray was seized by the Republic. Sidious warned Dooku that the Viceroy could not be allowed to face Jedi interrogation because Neimoidians were known for their loose lips. To that end, Dooku planned to send Ventress to free or silence him, even as Sidious questioned her competence after her earlier failures. Still, Dooku gave his assassin the mission and warned that she must prove herself. Ventress succeeded, aiding in Gunray's escape. Dooku then arranged a test for Grievous. He lured Jedi Master Kit Fisto, Fisto's former apprentice Nadar Veb, and their clone troopers to the fortress on Vasek. He deactivated the Magna Guards and offered Fisto an alternative prize while Nadar pursued Gunray. Dooku told Grievous that the trial had been arranged, to which Grievous succeeded in killing the inexperienced Nadar but failed in defeating Kit Fisto, who had escaped the fortress. Dooku remarked that there was room for improvement, considering that Grievous merely killed an easier target. Soon afterward, Dooku captured Skywalker in a skirmish between their forces. Kenobi arrived in time to rescue his former apprentice, opening a confrontation with Dooku. However, the Count fled to his solar sailor as Republic forces closed in. Kenobi shot Dooku down, forcing him to crash land on Vancor, where he was captured by Hondo Ohnaka and his Weequay pirates after learning he was a Sith Lord. Anakin and Obi-Wan followed Dooku and tried to bargain with the Weequay for the Sith Lord. However, they were also captured by the pirates as Hondo wanted to maximize his profits. In what was an unsteady alliance, Dooku worked together with the Jedi to escape the pirates. As Dooku fled the planet, he harbored a grudge against Hondo for what was one of the most embarrassing moments in his life. Upon his return from his previous skirmishes, Dooku secretly supported Death Watch on Mandalore. He spoke with Pre Vizsla of Concordia about the Jedi's inquiry into the terrorist attacks on the planet. They knew that if the Republic sent an occupation force, the people would revolt and join Death Watch, allowing the traditional Mandalorians to take over the planet. To that end, Dooku had Vizsla send an assassin to Coruscant to kill Duchess Satine Kryze. However, with the help of her good friend Obi-Wan, Satine survived the assassination attempt. Still, Mandalore was under Death Watch's control. Dooku warned Vizsla that Death Watch would never hold the planet for long without its armies. The uneasy alliance led to a betrayal as Dooku fought Vizsla, leaving a lightsaber scar on the Mandalorian's face as a parting gift. Meanwhile, Vizsla swore vengeance on Dooku and the Sith. Chapter 12. Failed Apprentices. In the middle of the war, there seemed to be no end in sight, as both forces balanced one another with wins and losses. But that wasn't enough for Dooku, and more importantly, Darth Sidious. The Sith wanted absolute victory, and Sidious believed that Dooku's apprentice was far from worthy, especially after her repeated failures against the Jedi. Weakness had no place within the Sith, and so Sidious ordered Tyrannus to eliminate his assassin. But in truth, Sidious was growing fearful of Ventress's growing power. Knowing that the never-ending cycle of the Rule of Two involved an apprentice killing a master, Sidious wanted to ensure his place as the master. He didn't want Ventress to grow strong enough to help Dooku overthrow him. As such, he wanted the assassin gone, an order Dooku hesitantly complied with, as he didn't want his master questioning his fidelity. He reached Ventress at Sullust and recalled her reinforcements. She begged for help destroying the Jedi, however, Dooku merely told her she was no longer his apprentice, and that death was coming. Tyrannus then called the tactical droid TJ-912 aboard its destroyer. He ordered the droid to target the flagship and kill Ventress. TJ-912 executed the strike and reported her death. After confirming with the droid that Ventress was indeed dead, Tyrannus commanded a withdrawal and notified Sidious that his assassin had been destroyed. His loyalty stood affirmed. However, Ventress survived and returned home to Dathomir to meet with Mother Talzin and the rest of the Night Sisters. While Talzin had an uneasy alliance with Dooku, she was more loyal to her daughters. To that end, she aided Ventress in an assassination attempt against Dooku. sending her and a few other sisters to Sereno. Ventress and Night Sisters posed as Jedi and infiltrated his palace. Their poison dulled the Count's senses, but Dooku was still far more powerful. He answered with Sith lightning, driving the assailants off and foiling their attempt, but Dooku's dulled senses blinded him to the fact that Ventress was still alive. Mother Talzin then contacted Dooku. She knew of the loss of his prized assassin, offering him a male from Dathomir as a replacement. Dooku accepted the offer, believing Talzin was doing this to better their alliance. This led to the creation of Savage Opress, who had been strengthened by rage and Night Sister magic. On Sereno, Talzin delivered the Night Brother Savage Opress. Dooku admired Opress at first sight. Talzin described him as the fiercest of his kind and assured Dooku that Opress would serve him well. However, Opress was supposed to be a trap set in place to eventually betray Dooku and serve as Ventress's ally. Still, Opress needed to grow in power and experience before he was ready to take on a powerful Sith Lord. Dooku sent him to seize the Republic outpost on Deveron, where Opress succeeded after eliminating the Jedi stationed there. News of the victory convinced Dooku that this new apprentice was strong enough to take the previous one's place. He believed that together they could defeat Sidious and rule the galaxy. But Dooku proved to be a harsh master to Opress. He drilled lightsaber combat and the power of the dark side into his apprentice, using pain and torture to strengthen the Dathomirian Zabrak. Dooku used Force Lightning to pry the hatred out of Opress and force obedience out of him, but those methods proved too harsh that they eventually backfired. Dooku sent Opress to capture the Toydarian king. However, he failed in doing so because he opted to kill the king instead. Angered by his apprentice's failure, Dooku pelted him with Force Lightning, forcing hatred to overcome Opress's obedience. That was when Ventress revealed herself alive, exposing that she was Opress's real master. The Dathomirian duo attacked Dooku together, forcing the Sith Lord on the defensive. But when Ventress berated her supposed apprentice, Opress had had enough. In his rage, he dominated both Dooku and Ventress, foiling Ventress's revenge plot. The former assassin escaped Dooku amid the chaos. Meanwhile, Opress also forced his way out of Dooku's services as the Sith Lord was now left without an apprentice to carry out his will. Chapter 13. Encounters with Anakin. Dooku's failures as a master were well documented. His first Jedi apprentice failed as a Jedi after leaving the Order. Qui-Gon Jinn died an untimely death, and Dooku's final Jedi apprentice turned to the dark side and was a disgrace to his legacy. Meanwhile, as a Sith Lord, both his apprentices ended up betraying him. Now his legacy hung in the balance as he knew he needed the help of a younger and equally powerful apprentice to eventually help him overthrow Darth Sidious. Fate would have it that he often bumped into Anakin Skywalker during the war. Turning Skywalker to the dark side, however, required finesse and patience instead of force. He knew Anakin was loyal to the Republic, but was increasingly becoming more popular because of his unorthodox methods as a renegade. Dooku also knew Skywalker was growing stronger as the war raged on, making him believe that Anakin would one day become a good ally against Sidious. So, instead of seducing him to the dark side, Dooku wanted to steadily draw the darkness out of the young Skywalker. In a campaign involving the Gungans of Naboo, Dooku and his Magna Guards proceeded to duel with Anakin. Every chance he got, he always made it clear to Anakin that the Sith controlled the whole galaxy without the Jedi's knowledge. Of course, every duel also proved vital because Dooku used their encounters as opportunities to test Skywalker's skills while drawing more darkness out of him. In that battle, he and his Magna Guards captured Skywalker to use him as a bargaining chip against the Republic, who had Grievous in their custody. The Sith Lord bargained with Padme Amidala, knowing that the Senator was close with the Jedi Knight. At first, Amidala refused to give Grievous up in exchange for Anakin, but as Dooku continued to torture Skywalker, Padme had no choice but to exchange the cyborg general for her secret husband. Not too long after, Dooku allied himself with the Zygerian slaver Commander Darts Dinar and Queen Mirage Sintel, who had captured a Togruta colony for the purposes of enslaving them. Owing to his past as a slave, Anakin took on this mission as he harbored a deep hatred for slavers. But in doing so, Skywalker needed to get close to Queen Mirage. But the Queen captured and subdued Anakin, believing he could be her bodyguard and slave. After learning that the Queen had Anakin under her control, Dooku demanded for his execution. Though he admired her scheme of enslaving the Jedi, Dooku still wanted Skywalker dead, for he wanted the Jedi Order destroyed, not enslaved. He warned the Queen that her control over Anakin was but an illusion. Still, the Queen refused to execute Skywalker, prompting the Zygerian Prime Minister Molech to adjudge her unfit to rule. Dooku then used the Force to choke the Queen as Skywalker arrived to witness the deed. The Sith Lord and the Jedi Knight fought, but Dooku eventually escaped by telling the Zygerian Royal Guard to kill Skywalker for the Queen's murder. Chapter 14. Clone Wars Side Stories. Dooku may have been unsuccessful at either turning Anakin to the dark side or killing him, but he saw more success in his other endeavors during the middle of the war. He never forgot about the treachery of Asajj Ventress and Savage Opress, and their common denominator was none other than Mother Talzin. To that end, Dooku dispatched Grievous to wipe out Talzin and the Night Sisters at the behest of Sidious. Grievous and the droid army proved strong against Night Sister magic, but Talzin, however, used the very same lock of hair Dooku gave her decades ago as her trump card. She used her magic to curse Dooku, who was light years away. Talzin demanded he call off Grievous and the army, but Dooku relented. He ordered his general to find and kill Talzin before she killed him. Grievous arrived just in time to defeat Talzin in the Night Sister village, allowing their campaign to be successful as the Night Sisters were rendered nearly extinct. Dooku had exacted his revenge on Talzin, even though it nearly cost him his life. Following the Night Sister massacre, Dooku expressed his concerns to Grievous about Savage Opress, fearing that the monstrous Night Brother might go rogue with Talzin gone. Dooku sensed he was becoming more powerful, wondering if Opress would become a danger to him and his master if he were to find a purpose. Unbeknownst to Dooku, Darth Maul had returned to the galactic stage with Opress at his side. Dooku had sensed this but was unsure of what it was. But instead of sending Grievous to hunt down Opress, he sent him against Onaka for revenge, as the pirate once held him prisoner for ransom. Onaka survived the assault, but much of his base was left in ruins. Then there was another story, much darker than Dooku had been involved with in the past. He traveled to the planet Bray to meet with a different Dark Lord named Ravna at the Citadel of Light. Ravna was neither Sith nor Jedi. He didn't even use the Force. Instead, he was akin to a vampire, capable of infecting living beings to turn them into violent, bloodthirsty creatures. Dooku wanted to work with Ravna in the hopes of using his power to turn clones into his minions. But Ravna's goal was to infect the entire galaxy. So even with the interventions of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Adi Gallia, the Dark Lord betrayed Dooku. He proceeded to transform the Sith Lord before Kenobi forced Dooku to tap into his anger by calling him pathetic. That was part of the plan because the Count used his power to attack Ravna. As he kept the vampire occupied with Force lightning, Dooku told Kenobi and Gallia to bury him under rubble, defeating the creature and allowing Dooku to escape. The galaxy still had something more in store for Dooku, after all, as the war raged on. Chapter 15. Nearing the end of the war. The war was still seemingly at a deadlock between the two forces, but Dooku received a transmission from Admiral Trench as he received word of an event that could possibly foil the Sith's plans. From a line held on Rango Vinda, Trench reported that a clone had murdered his Jedi general while trapped in a trance-like state. Tyrannus warned his master that Order 66 risked exposure. Sidious ordered him to abduct the trooper and examine him. Dooku relayed the command to Trench, who carried out the seizure. Dooku praised the success and demanded that the prisoner be sent to him. But plans always find a way to collapse. Acting as Darth Tyranus, Dooku heard from Lama Su and Nala Se about the trooper. He demanded the inhibitor chip and repeated his lie about its intent, claiming only Sifo-Dyas had known of it. CT-5555, the clone trooper known as Fives, stole the chip. Worried, Tyrannus insisted the Jedi must not learn the truth as he tried to find a way to kill the clone. The plan succeeded with Fives' death. After the clone's demise, Sidious gave Tyrannus the chips and ordered their destruction to ensure their plan would stay hidden. Sidious then assigned a political task. He told Dooku to recruit Senator Rush Clovis again and install him as the head of the banking clan. Dooku contacted Clovis through the medical droid that treated him. He offered to pay the Confederacy's interest on its loans and to provide details of the moon's secret accounts. In exchange, Clovis would take control of the clan and serve the separatist agenda. Clovis took office on Scipio. Dooku congratulated him, then demanded repayment. If Clovis resisted, Dooku would expose the appointment and halt Confederate payments. Pressured, Clovis raised Republic interest rates to keep the bank afloat. Dooku arrived with a fleet and ordered Commander Kraken to begin the invasion. He entered Clovis's office and confronted Padme Amidala. Bek Lawais objected when Dooku ordered Amidala's arrest, saying their Senate would not approve. Dooku forced Amidala to shoot Lawais. Soon after, Sidious warned Tyrannus that the Republic fleet would arrive shortly. Anakin Skywalker led the attack against Kraken's formation. Dooku boarded Kraken's flagship in order to withdraw from Scipio. But Kraken protested the order, informing Dooku that droid forces remained on the surface. Dooku dismissed the objection and repeated the command. The fleet pulled back and left the droid army behind. The retreat stranded Separatist units and ceded the ground battle to the Republic. Around 19 BBY, Dooku dispatched the Serenian Duke Solha to the Outer Rim world Mokivi. The Count had learned of cortosis, a metal that shut down lightsabers and deflected blaster bolts. Solha seized a fortress and converted it to a droid factory. He and his siblings manufactured a model of B-2 super battle droid equipped with cortosis armor. The plant also produced clone trooper armor plated with cortosis. Sidious intended to deploy that armor when Order 66 was executed to ensure absolute victory for the clones. The scheme did not last because Senator Amidala, Senior Captain Mithra Nurohodo, known as Thrawn, and Anakin Skywalker discovered the factory and attacked it. Thrawn was yet to become a part of the known galaxy, but was still loyal to the Chiss ascendancy in the unknown regions. However, he had to ally himself with the Republic for purposes beneficial to his people. During the assault, Amidala told Sola that Serenian custom allowed a prisoner one last request in what seemed like a ruse to slow down her execution. Sola said Dooku was still working out the details. Ultimately, however, the attackers destroyed the plant and ended the Cortosis project on Mokiv, and foiling another one of Dooku's plans. This failure, and many others, was one of the reasons Sidious was losing faith in his apprentice. Not too long after, Yoda discussed Sifo-Dyas with Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, oblivious to the fact that he was sharing the Jedi's plans with their biggest enemy. Alarmed, Sidious summoned Dooku to inform him that the Jedi had renewed their inquiry on Sifo-Dyas. Believing his apprentice was sloppy in hiding Sifo's demise, he punished Tyrannus with a choking grip. But he did send him to Obadiah, the homeworld of the Pike Syndicate, to block the Jedi from learning the truth about the clone army and its intended fate. Tyrannus arrived in time to find former Chancellor Finis Valorum, former aide Silman. Dooku killed him before the investigators, Skywalker and Kenobi, could unravel the trail. The Pikes later cornered Tyrannus during his fight with the Jedi. In speaking to the Sith, they unknowingly revealed to Skywalker and Kenobi that Dooku and the figure called Tyrannus were the same person. Kenobi and Skywalker were surprised to learn that Tyrannus was not some mysterious figure, but was the same exact enemy they'd been fighting for years. Feeling betrayed, the Pikes allied with the Jedi to kill Dooku. But Tyrannus killed the Pike leader, Lom Pike, before fleeing on a Coruscant freighter. Skywalker gave chase after a timely assist from his former master. There, the two had a rematch of their fateful one-on-one fight. Still, Dooku proved to be the more skillful duelist as he defeated Anakin and escaped. Soon after that incident, Kraken informed Dooku that Lord Sidious demanded his presence on Coruscant. Dooku traveled to the works and entered the tower's ceremonial chamber, where Sidious greeted him and spoke in a quiet voice. Both Sith felt Yoda's presence on Moraband for a reason they did not yet understand. Tyrannus offered his blood for a rite that would snare his former master. Together, they called Sith Lightning and began the illusion. The ritual formed a battlefield, where Yoda appeared with Anakin Skywalker, Captain Rex, and a squad of clone troopers. Their task was clear: eliminate the Sith. Dooku hurled Force Lightning into the ranks and broke their line. Skywalker closed for the kill and met Tyrannus blade to blade. Eventually, Anakin struck Dooku down within the vision, forcing the rite to end without them reaching their goal of breaking Yoda. That event made Sidious understand they needed more time if they were to break the Jedi Grand Master. In turn, Dooku turned his gaze to a different prize near the end of the war. Reports spoke of a massive Kyber crystal buried on the neutral planet Utapau. He and General Grievous set a quiet operation in motion, hiring Amani mercenaries under Endente, a Sugi arms dealer. But Jedi Master Tuan found the site and paid with her life. Her death drew Kenobi and Skywalker to Utapau. The trail led through the plains and into the wilderness. They tracked Amani raiders and learned of the Sugi's movements. The mercenaries captured the Jedi and delivered them to Indente. He admitted the Confederacy's interest in the crystal and sensed profit. Kenobi and Skywalker tried to buy the crystal for twice the price. Indente contacted Dooku by hologram and demanded more money. Dooku ordered him to kill the Jedi and promised that Grievous would visit. The prisoners, however, defeated their guards and escaped with the crystal. Grievous learned of Indente's failure and executed him. With Blom's help, he ambushed the Jedi and seized the crystal, and loaded it onto his shuttle to transfer it to a supply ship. Kenobi and Skywalker pursued and fought through the decks before the cyborg captured Obi-Wan. Grievous sent word to Dooku, who ordered the execution of the Jedi Master and the transport of the Kyber crystals to Sereno. However, the Jedi broke free and sabotaged Grievous's ship. They destroyed the crystals along with Grievous's fleet. Grievous, however, escaped into the dark without informing Dooku of his failure. Chapter 16: The Dark Disciple and Maul. Luck was not on Dooku's side as far as apprentices were concerned. Ventress was a failure, and Opress was too savage to control. Meanwhile, despite being more reliable, Grievous had his own share of failures. Unfortunately for Dooku, one of his apprentices was far from done with him. In the last stretch of the Clone Wars, Count Dooku ordered an operation on Marani, and the result was the erasure of the Maran species. He did not hide intent. Any Maran found alive was to be killed on sight. The Jedi Council on Coruscant watched the aftermath and weighed options beyond standard doctrine. Obi-Wan Kenobi proposed a partnership that would never pass in calmer times. Quinlan Vos would work with Asajj Ventress. Vos entered the underworld beside her and posed as a fellow hunter. He hid his identity until trust had some shape. When he told her the truth, she did not walk away because she wanted revenge for Dooku's crimes against her people and herself. She agreed to teach Vos the dark ways so that they could bring the Count down. When Vos finished the training Ventress had promised, word came from a separatist contact named Sumden. Dooku, with Grievous accompanying him, would travel to Raxus Secundus to accept the Raxian Humanitarian Award for service to the Confederacy. Before the ceremony, Dooku delivered a patriotic speech to a packed square. He defended the Separatist cause and blamed the Republic and the Jedi for the galaxy's pain. A banquet followed, and Ventress approached Dooku there to challenge him to a duel. He agreed and quietly called Grievous for support. Vos had planned for that. He confronted the cyborg and, though overwhelmed, managed to seal him in a chamber long enough to keep him away from the duel. During the duel, Ventress and Vos faced Dooku together. Dooku held the higher ground in skill and focus. He pressed the pair with precise footwork and cold burst of telekinesis. Vos refused to yield, but could not turn the tide of battle in their favor. Ventress fought to create space, yet the Count split their timing and isolated Vos. He captured the Jedi and ended the exchange with a surge of lightning. Ventress broke away after clashing with the freed Grievous. She escaped, but Vos fell into Dooku's hands and was taken to Sereno. On Sereno, the Count worked to break his prisoner. The torment dragged on until Dooku revealed a recording of Ventress killing Vos's former master, Thulm. Vos rejected it and held to the life he thought he knew. Dooku then produced Thulm's lightsaber and let the Jedi touch the past. Vos read the truth through psychometry and felt the hollow place that followed. Soon after, Ventress led a rescue with hunters drawn from Boba Fett's circle. They reached Vos, but he struck at Ventress with dark fury. The team withdrew empty-handed, and Dooku had won a new apprentice. Vos bent to the dark and pledged service while concealing a private plan to use Dooku to reach Darth Sidious and kill them both. He was a double agent, unbeknownst to both Dooku and Ventress. Not long after, the Count joined Sidious at the Spire on Stygian Prime to interrogate Maul about the Shadow Collective after he had been captured following his duel with his former master. But Maul escaped with Mandalorian commandos to Zanbar. Dooku sent Grievous and Tezuka to shatter Maul's strength and waited for the spirit of Mother Talzin to show herself. He then traveled to Ord Mantell with Magna Guards to seize Maul and level the city if needed. Brother Viscus and Night Brothers attacked and were cut down. Before Dooku could finish Viscus, Maul's forces surrounded him. The former Sith offered a bargain that would turn the war. He tried to convince Dooku to abandon Sidious and serve Maul. Dooku refused and named Sidious the greater power. but they never fought because the Republic forces boarded the ship. The situation forced the Count to fight beside Maul long enough to kill the Jedi who stood in the way, including Tipley, before escaping with Gar Saxon and Rook Kast. Maul brought Dooku to Dathomir. In the Night Brother village, Talzin's magic drained the Count to rebuild her body anew, allowing her to take physical form again following her death at the hands of Grievous a while back. Soon after, she possessed Dooku and used his frame as a shield. Sidious and Grievous arrived during the rite and forced a shift. Talzin stepped free of Dooku and took shape in the flesh. The battle broke across the chamber as Dooku stood with his master and pressed Talzin and Maul with blade and lightning. Maul fled when the tide turned. Meanwhile, Grievous struck Talzin down, once more becoming her killer. The Sith were victorious as Sidious told his apprentice their plan was still in motion. After Talzin's fall, Dooku set Quinlan Vos at his side and renewed the campaign against the Republic, with Vos using the name Admiral Enigma. Then Admiral Wolf Yularen carried intelligence that Dooku would strike Taris. The Council planned a recovery. With Ventress as a guide, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker infiltrated Dooku's Providence-class dreadnought and reached the bridge. They did not find Admiral Enigma there. Instead, they found Dooku. Skywalker met the Count in another duel while Kenobi and Ventress recovered Vos from a cell. The rescue had been staged. Vos appeared weak by design and the Jedi brought him home. Ventress sensed the truth, but her allies did not. Vos returned as a spy inside the Order, continuing his role as a double agent. He leaked 2 sensitive operations to Dooku, allowing the Separatists to strike before the Republic could act. But while the Council understood that Vos had fallen, they still sent him to finish Dooku. Ventress supported him. Vos slipped aboard Dooku's dreadnought and fought Dooku in the corridors. This time, he drove the Count to defeat. But while he was victorious, he refused to kill Dooku. Instead, he demanded that the Count lead him to Darth Sidious, as his ultimate mission was to destroy both Sith Lords, not just one. But before Dooku could squeal, Kenobi and Skywalker arrived to arrest both him and Vos. While escorts marched them toward the brig, Vos slipped the restraints and freed Dooku. The Count returned the favor. They cut down the Jedi Knights Akar Deshu and Kav Bayans and killed scores of clones. They stole Ventress's ship, the Banshee, but the Republic ship took their own ship down, forcing them to crash on Christophsis. The survivors reached a Separatist base carved inside a giant crystal tower and signaled within, with Dooku heavily injured from the crash. A hologram from Sidious demanded the Count's report. Instead of reporting, Dooku asked for help leaving the world. Before help could arrive, Republic forces began a full assault that shook them. The pursuit drove all of them into the outlying sanctum. Then a blaster shot struck Dooku and dropped him. Ventress said they should let him die, but Vos refused and kept him alive. Ventress dragged the Count into the sanctum as droids formed a line. Dooku woke and taunted her. But Vos arrived and argued with Ventress about his choice to stand with Dooku. Despite his injuries, the Count ended the talk with a storm of lightning aimed at Vos. But Ventress shoved Vos clear and took the full blast. She was mortally wounded. Dooku tried to draw Vos into murder by angering him. However, despite his feelings for Ventress, Vos saw the trap and refused to fall deeper into the dark side. He told Ventress he was done with the dark. While Vos held the dying Ventress, Dooku fled the sanctum to meet a ship sent by Sidious and escaped with aid from Grievous. The Jedi later pardoned Vos, who returned to service carrying the weight of what had happened. As for Dooku, this was the last time his master would aid him in a life-or-death situation. Chapter 17. Betrayed. The Clone Wars neared their end, and the battle reached just outside Coruscant. By that time, it had been clear to Palpatine that Anakin was ripe for seduction. As the Chancellor, he formed a good relationship with Skywalker, often acting like the father figure Anakin never had. While Dooku advanced the Separatist cause, his master had been grooming a younger and more talented warrior to serve as a replacement. So, just before the Battle of Coruscant, Sidious had decided Anakin needed to take his place as the next Sith apprentice. More importantly, the Sith Lord no longer had a use for his aging apprentice. To that end, Dooku became a part of the plan to capture Palpatine during the Battle of Coruscant. Dooku then informed Grievous of the impending news that the Separatist had a chance of recovery and victory. As such, Grievous's fleet was able to leap directly from the Outer Rim to Coruscant thanks to Darth Sidious, who had obtained the coordinates and provided them with a plan to kidnap the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. Earlier, Dooku had relocated his command post to Grievous's flagship, the Invisible Hand, allowing him to stay close to his most trusted general and to ensure his orders were followed to the letter. While Grievous posed no threat to him, Sidious wanted to avoid any setbacks to his plan because this was deemed the most crucial portion of his grander scheme of turning Anakin to the dark side. After Grievous captured the Chancellor, he held Palpatine captive in the Invisible Hand. Meanwhile, the general oversaw the battle from the communications tower. Dooku stayed close to Palpatine and ordered the general to attack the Republic fleet. As the Battle of Coruscant raged, Dooku proclaimed to the galaxy that the Republic leader was his hostage. Quick to react, the Jedi High Council sent their two most effective Jedi frontliners to rescue the Chancellor. Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker sprang into action and made their way through the debris and the fighters just above the atmosphere of Coruscant before infiltrating the Invisible Hand. While they struggled, the Jedi duo made their way to the bridge where Chancellor Palpatine was being held. They attempted to rescue him before Dooku arrived to confront the two Jedi. He then engaged them in a lightsaber duel. This time, Anakin and Obi-Wan were ready to take him as a duo. During the duel, Dooku took Kenobi out of commission by knocking him unconscious. This led to a one-on-one battle between Anakin and Dooku, one that had always been in the Count's favor throughout his numerous duels with Skywalker. But as Anakin boldly proclaimed before their battle, his powers had doubled. It was not a mere bluff spoken out of hubris because Anakin had indeed become too powerful for Dooku. Tapping into his rage, Skywalker overpowered Dooku. With one slash of his lightsaber, he severed both the Count's hands and caught Dooku's saber out of the air. He crossed it with his own blade at Dooku's throat, with the Count looking shocked after his defeat. Palpatine praised Anakin for his victory, but he quickly ordered Anakin to kill Dooku, with the Count horrified by his master's command. Dooku had been betrayed as he learned the harsh truth about being a Sith. It was all about power and betrayal, and Sidious happened to be on the advantageous side. Dooku also understood that he was always just a tool that Sidious used from the very start. The signs were there, and even Maul and Talzin warned him about his fate as a disposable pawn. But he truly believed he and his master were going to change the galaxy together. At that moment, however, it was clear Sidious never cared for him at all, ordering the young Jedi to kill him. Anakin initially relented because it was not the Jedi way to kill an unarmed prisoner. However, after a second prompt from the Chancellor, Anakin pulled the two lightsabers apart, decapitating and killing Dooku with a swift movement. Dooku died the same way he entered the galaxy. He was abandoned by his father at birth, leaving him to his death. And in death, his master abandoned him the same way.